Alex Eala just lost at Roland Garros 5 days ago. She turned 21 during the French Open. She's now arriving at Birmingham as the top seed on the surface, where she's had her best results. This is a story about a player at a crossroads, with Birmingham as the proving ground. 5 days ago, Alex Eala walked off the clay at Roland Garros after losing to Ivana in straight sets. It was her second consecutive first-round exit at a major this spring, and it happened the week she turned 21. The score was 4-6, 2-6. She had 2 break points in the very first game and converted neither. Then she watched a teenager ranked 20 spots below her dismantle her second serve for the next hour. By the time it ended, Jovic had won 14 second serve points to Eala's 6. That is not a statistic you can explain away. That is a player being told, in the most direct language tennis offers, that a fundamental part of her game is not yet ready for the level she has reached. Here is the thing about that loss that nobody seems to want to say out loud. It was not a surprise. Eala's 2026 clay court season produced 4 wins across 5 tournaments. Her career win rate on clay sits at 44%. She has never been comfortable there, and this year she did not pretend to be. She went to Stuttgart and lost to Leylah Fernandez 6-1, 6-4. She fought through Rome, genuinely competed, beat Magdalena Frech in 3 sets, beat Wang Xinyu in straights, but then ran into Elena Rybakina in the 3rd round and was outclassed 6-4, 6-3. The clay swing was honest work for modest returns, and anyone who watched it closely could see a player grinding through a surface that does not reward what she does best. So why does that matter now? Because tomorrow, Monday, June 1st, the grass court season officially begins. And it begins for Alex Eala at the Birmingham Open, where she is the number 1 seed, where the surface changes underneath her completely, and where she opens against an opponent she has a complicated history with, Priscilla Hon of Australia. If you want to watch this match, it will be available on Tennis Channel in the US and through various regional broadcasters, depending on your location. Check the WTA website for your specific country. The tournament runs from June 1st through the 7th at the Edgbaston Priory Club. But the reason I wanted to talk about this particular match goes beyond the broadcast information. This is a match that carries weight far beyond a first-round result at a WTA 125 event, and here is why. Alex Eala's best tennis, her genuinely dangerous, top 30 caliber tennis, lives on grass. That sounds counterintuitive for a player whose biggest documented weakness is her serve, a shot that grass is supposed to amplify. But the numbers do not lie. Her career win rate on grass is 64%, 20 full points higher than her clay record. Last year at Eastbourne, she qualified into the main draw, beat Ons Jabeur 7-5, 6-2, steamrolled Diana Yastremska 6-1, 6-2, survived Varvara Gracheva in 3 sets in the semis, and reached her first and only WTA Tour final. She lost it to Maya Joint in a match tiebreak, 7-6 in the 3rd, 10 points to 8 in the breaker. That is as close as she has come to a title at any level on tour. The grass suits something specific about Eala's game that is easy to miss if you only look at the serve. She is left-handed, 5'9", and she generates angles that right-handed players rarely see. On grass, where the ball stays low and skids through the court, those angles become sharper because opponents have less time to adjust. Her backhand, which is her real weapon, travels through the strike zone faster on a surface with less friction. And here is the part that matters most. Her return game, which is genuinely elite, becomes proportionally more valuable on grass because every player's serve is harder to break. If you can return at the level Eala does, on a surface where most players lean heavily on their serve to hold, you do not need your own serve to be a weapon. You just need it to be functional enough to avoid being broken routinely. That is the calculation she has been making her entire grass career. At Eastbourne last year, it worked all the way to the final. The question for this week is whether it still works after the battering her confidence took in Paris. Now, about Priscilla Hon. This is a 28-year-old Australian who has been on tour since she turned professional at 14. Think about that for a moment. She has been doing this for half her life. Her career high came last October at World number 94, the culmination of a 2025 season where she went 37-21, won 2 ITF titles, and made the third round of the US Open as a qualifier. For a player who spent years between rankings 100 and 200, that was a genuine arrival. This year has been a different story. Her record stands at 5 wins and 12 losses. She is ranked 143. She lost in French Open qualifying to Jessica Ponchit 7-5, 6-2. Before that, she lost her first match in Parma to Susan Bandecki in 3 sets. Before that, she lost her opening qualifying round in Miami. The pattern is clear. She has been unable to sustain what she built in 2025, and the gap between her current ranking and her recent results suggests a player in freefall rather than a temporary dip. But here is what makes the Hon matchup tricky. These two have played before twice. Eala won their first meeting in 2023 at Roehampton. Hon won their second in 2024 at Ningbo qualifying, 6-4, 6-3. That Ningbo result is relevant because of how it happened. Hon dictated play from the baseline, kept the ball deep, and refused to let Eala generate the angles she wanted. For a player whose game is built on creating geometric problems for opponents, being pinned to the center of the baseline by someone willing to absorb pace and redirect it deep is genuinely uncomfortable. The question is whether Hon can replicate that approach on grass. And this is where the analysis gets specific. Hon's grass court record is, to put it plainly, bad. At the WTA level, she is 0-3 on grass lifetime. At the Challenger and ITF level combined, she is 5-7. Even in 2025, her best overall season, she went 4-3 on grass, with 3 of those wins coming at lower-tier events. She has never won a WTA-level match on this surface. Ever. In her entire career. That is a remarkable statistic for a player who grew up in Brisbane, where there is no shortage of grass courts available, and who has been competing professionally for over a decade. The problem is structural, not mysterious. Hon is a hard-court player whose game relies on absorbing pace and using her opponent's power against them. She is comfortable in long rallies. She likes time on the ball. She prefers to stand 2 or 3 feet behind the baseline and use depth as her primary weapon. On grass, where the ball arrives lower and faster, that extra time disappears. The bounce is unpredictable compared to hard courts. Rallies shorten. And the skills that make her effective on hard courts, patience, depth, defensive resilience, get compressed into a time frame that does not suit her rhythm. Against Eala specifically, this creates a problem with a sharp edge. Eala's left-handed serve, even though it is not powerful by WTA standards, slides wide on the ad court in a way that grass amplifies. The ball skids instead of sitting up. For a returner like Hon, who prefers the ball to come chest-high off a predictable bounce, that sliding delivery forces movement and creates vulnerable returns that Eala can attack with her forehand. On hard courts, Hon can neutralize this pattern because the bounce is more uniform and she has time to set up. On grass, the geometry tilts against her. There is a specific tactical scenario I want you to watch for if you tune in. Pay attention to what happens when Eala gets her first serve in on the ad side. If she can consistently push Hon wide and then take the short ball with her forehand cross court, the rally will be over in 2 or 3 shots. That is the sequence that Eala used repeatedly at Eastbourne last year. It is her grass court bread and butter. And it is precisely the kind of quick strike pattern that Hon's game is designed to prevent, but may not be able to on this surface. Now, all of that said, I am not here to tell you this is a foregone conclusion. Eala has real vulnerabilities that Hon can exploit, and they are the same vulnerabilities that have followed her all season. The serve. We have to talk about the serve again. Eala averages 0.8 aces per match across the last year. On the entire WTA Tour, that is essentially as low as it gets among top 50 players. Her first serve speed sits below 90 miles per hour. At the Australian Open, she got her first serve win percentage up to 68%, which was an improvement from the 59% she posted at the US Open before that. But those numbers remain below average, and on grass, where free points on serve can decide tight sets, her inability to generate aces or unreturnable deliveries means she will face break points in almost every service game. Han, for all her grass court struggles, actually generates far more power on serve, averaging 4.5 aces per match over the last year compared to Eala's 0.8. If Han can hold serve comfortably while pressuring Eala's service games, the dynamic of the match changes. Instead of Eala dictating on return and building a lead, the match becomes a dogfight where every Eala service game is contested and the pressure accumulates on the top seed to hold under duress. There is a mental dimension here that the numbers alone cannot capture, and it involves what happened to each player in the last week. Eala lost to Jovic at Roland Garros on Monday. That was 5 days ago. She turned 21 during the tournament. She is now arriving at Birmingham having lost 3 of her last 4 matches, with her ranking having slipped from its career high of 29 to 37. The clay swing was not a disaster. The Rome run showed she can still compete against strong players on difficult surfaces, but it did not produce the results that sustain momentum. She is entering the grass season needing something positive. Not needing it in the abstract, motivational poster sense, but in the concrete, ranking points sense. She is defending 219 points from last year's grass swing, including the 163 points from her Eastbourne final run. If she loses early in Birmingham, the math starts working against her before Eastbourne even begins. Han's situation is different. She arrives in Birmingham with almost nothing to lose. Her ranking is 143. Her 2026 record is 5-12. She did not have a grass court swing last year that produced significant points to defend. She is here because the entry cutoff for a WTA 125 event reaches into her ranking range, and she earned her spot legitimately. For Han, winning a single round against the top seed on a surface where she has historically struggled would be the best result of her season. That is a liberating position to play from. And that asymmetry, Eala needing this week to work out, Han having nothing at stake, can manifest in the tennis itself. Top seeds who carry ranking pressure into first rounds against lower-ranked opponents sometimes play tight. They overprotect their serve instead of swinging freely. They avoid risk on return because they feel the weight of being expected to win. Eala is experienced enough at 21 to have learned how to manage that pressure, but the question is whether the Roland Garros loss is still echoing in her decision-making. Whether she steps onto the grass at Edgbaston Priory and feels the freedom that comes with being on her best surface, or whether she carries the heaviness of 5 days ago onto a new court. I keep coming back to last year's Eastbourne run because it tells you something about what Eala is capable of when the surface unlocks her game. She beat Jabeur, a former Wimbledon finalist, in the first round, and it was not a tight match. She won 7-5, 6-2, and she did it by controlling the points from the baseline, finding angles that Jabeur could not cover despite her famous touch and variety. Then she demolished Yastremska, a player known for power, 6-1, 6-2. That is a statement result. And in the final against Maya Joint, she lost a match tiebreak by 2 points after winning the second set 6-1. She was right there. What that tells me is that grass does not just suit Eala's game technically, it seems to suit her temperament. She plays with more freedom. She takes the ball earlier. She commits to patterns without the hesitation that sometimes creeps into her hard-court tennis. Whether that is because the surface rewards aggression, or because she simply feels more confident on it, the effect is the same. She becomes a more decisive player. Birmingham is a smaller tournament than Eastbourne. The field at a WTA 125 does not include the depth that a WTA 500 or 1000 would bring. But for Eala, the value here is not just the points, it is the rhythm. She needs to play matches on grass before Eastbourne, where she has those 163 points to defend. Birmingham is where she starts building that match sharpness, and a first-round loss would cut that preparation short in a way that could ripple through the next 3 weeks. The tactical picture for this match comes down to 2 questions. First, can Eala establish her cross-court backhand early and use it to move Han forward, where the Australian is least comfortable? On grass, Eala's backhand stays low and forces opponents to either bend down for a half volley or back up and cede court position. If she can get that shot working in the first few games, she will have Han on the defensive for the duration. Second, can Han make enough first serves to avoid getting drawn into Eala's return game? Because if Han is serving second serves to a lefty whose best shot is her return, on a surface where the second serve sits up at a comfortable height, the break opportunities will come in clusters. And once Eala gets a break ahead on grass, her ability to hold serve, even with a weaker delivery, improves because she can play with more freedom on her own service games. My honest assessment is that Eala should win this match. The ranking gap is enormous, over 100 places. The surface favors her more than it favors honorable. Her grass court record is dramatically better. She has the head-to-head split, and the one match Han won came on hard courts at a qualifying level, not on grass at a seeded main draw event. And the motivation factor, while complicated by the Roland Garros loss, ultimately works in Eala's favor because she is a player who has repeatedly shown she responds to setbacks with improved performances. After losing to Fernandez in Stuttgart this year, she went to Rome and beat Freck and Wang back-to-back. After losing in the first round of the 2025 Birmingham event to Linda Fruhvirtova, she went to Eastbourne and reached the final. The pattern is there. Eala uses early losses to recalibrate, and she does it quickly. Birmingham is the first opportunity for that recalibration after Paris, and she is the top seed on a surface where she has genuine evidence of belonging. But the part of this that I cannot predict, the part that makes tennis what it is, involves what happens in the first 3 or 4 games. If Eala comes out loose, finds her backhand angle early, and breaks Han in the first set, this match could be straightforward. If she comes out tentative, drops serve early, and lets Han settle into the kind of deep, patient rallying that gave her trouble in Ningbo, it becomes a contest where Han's nothing-to-lose mentality has room to breathe. Watch the first 4 games. That is where you will see which version of Eala showed up, the player who demolished Yastremska on grass last summer, or the player who let Jovic run away with the match in Paris. If the answer is the former, this should be over in under 90 minutes. If the answer is the latter, Han is experienced enough and competitive enough to make it a genuine fight. The Birmingham Open starts June 1st, Eala versus Han in the first round. Tennis Channel for U.S. viewers, check your local WTA broadcast listings for other regions. This is the opening chapter of a grass court swing that will define whether Alex Eala's 2026 season finishes as a step forward or a missed opportunity. It starts with one match against an opponent she should beat, but sport does not deal in should.